Abiola won the June 12, 1993 presidential election.
Well, this revelation came at the launch of Babangida's Memoir, where President Bola Tinubu commended the former leader's courage to acknowledge the truth.
Now, beyond this, we would also examine how this recognition reshapes historical narratives and whether it sets a precedent for political accountability in Nigeria.
To help us unpack these issues, we're now joined by Kasim Afebwa, former spokesman to General Ibrahim Babangida and an APC chieftain. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and Good Morning Nigeria.
I'm curious, did you also advise him to make this public? What are the implications, by the way?
This has been a project for some time. Quite a number of us have said it to him on several occasions that he should try and document his own history, at least coming from him. A lot of the things he has written in this book were already known to the public, particularly with reference to the issue of June 12. But his voice has been drowned, in the cacophony of voices against that particular decision. I regret taking that action. He has said it repeatedly. I accept responsibility. He has said it repeatedly. But now that it is captured in his memoirs, it will also serve, present and upcoming generations to also have a feel of what transpired at that period.
All right, many thanks, Kasim, for your opening comments. But now, with this revelation, what does this mean, in terms of our history and our democratic journey?
Well, don't forget that a lot of people don't realize the fact that General Babangida ran a military government. It was not democratically elected ab initio. So now that there's democracy, the gains of June 12 is expected or are expected to be entrenched in the democratic culture. What are those gains? Beyond the annulment is the fact that the government was credited to have conducted a free, fair and transparent election, which by history writers and all that was adjudged to be the best in the history of the country. And so for me, I want to take off from there that even though we are craving for electoral reforms, we are craving for so many other things, we are not seeing the impact in our present day, democratic experimentation, democratic processes and all of that. Elections are still being contested in courts. You finish election, you still go to court, you want to go and seek redress, you don't accept outcome of results and all of that. I think Nigeria and Nigerians should understand that election is more or less like a sport. You have to exhibit that spirit of sportsmanship, accept the outcome of results, and no matter how manipulated they are, and believe that gradually we'll continue to deepen the conversation around democratic experimentation. Oftentimes, people have spoken so much on the June 12 issue from the perspective of IBB as his former spokesperson, and I have also been privileged to be given, a teaser kind of what transpired during that period. And essentially, even the book itself may not capture the entire details of what obtains throughout his trajectory as a military president for 8 years, but it gives an opening to quite a number of other stories and anecdotes that should naturally factorize his own leadership emanations. So June 12 has gain, and the gain is about electoral reforms. It's about the proof for conduct of credible elections, so that participants will accept the outcome without seeking litigations. The last time Nigerian electoral litigations have been rising, from 400 and something, it went to 700 and something, from there to 900 and something. Today we talk about 1,000 something after general elections. Different litigations at local level, central level, House of Rep level, and even presidential, such that when they are sworn in, they are still waiting for the outcome. And we have seen a lot of victories, legal victories, so to speak. You take a case to the tribunal, you wait for the outcome and all that. Like the one in Edo now, the September 21st election, now we are still in the tribunal, keeping people in abeyance of what will come up. The losers should be good losers, and they should also try as much as possible to accept the outcome of election, no matter how imperfect they are being conducted and all that. Elections cannot be perfect, like a football game. You go into the field, you play. At the end of the day, you may commit a foul and there will be a goal from there. It will not depend on what the referee will tell you. These days they have even introduced VAR, as the alternate referee and all of that. So these are the kind of things we should inculcate in the minds of those who are ready to play the game, and not necessarily every time we are, carrying cutlasses and all right. So that,
Thank you, Kassim Afebwa, for your opening remarks. Let me now introduce Professor of Mass Communication, Abiodun Adeniyi, who has just joined us on this conversation. A pleasure to welcome you again in Nigeria.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me once again.
But let me run you straight into this conversation. Now, IBB has finally spoken, but many Nigerians believe that this has come too late in the day. Does it really carry any weight now, any real weight in shaping, history or reconciliation?
From our own point of view, I don't think it's too late. It's good that it came at all. And of course, IBB occupies a primary place in the evolution, in the course of Nigeria's history. What he did with that book simply means the creation of knowledge, the production of knowledge towards sharing on an important aspect of the growth of the being and becoming of our nation. And we have seen leaders in the past who have been silent on their parts. Remember, Tunde Diagbo never, of blessed memory, never told us anything about his contributions, as it were, his parts, as it were, irrespective of the significance, that his coming made, when he did came. And of course, apart from what IBB has done now, the other president that I can remember that's actually contributed greatly to his election is probably Olusegun Obasanjo, and maybe to some extent go on through his institutes. So when we have leaders coming out, to express themselves, to provide insight on what transpired, while they were in power, it is actually helpful to the stimulation of knowledge and to the education of generations of Nigerians, towards what will probably become in the future. So I think it's a mark of courage on his part that, is an octogenarian, and may God give him long life, and we do not know when Almighty God will call on any one of us, including President Babangida, but that he has finally spoken on the controversial and never dying issue on June 12th is quite revealing, quite educating. And I think, like we often describe him, it looks like scoring another goal. For me, I was one of the angry Nigerians in the wake of the June 12th because I participated directly in it as a journalist, covering the election as it transpired. And I remember very clearly Area 10, the present headquarters of INEC, FCT, that was where headquarters of NEC was. I remember how we were waiting for Humphrey Nwosu to release the result, and it was quite disappointing as at the time they came to tell us, while we're releasing the results in bits, sending it to our headquarters in Lagos, in Kaduna, as the case could be, suddenly we were told that, there was an order from above after Professor Nwosu had visited Aso Rock, came back, there was an order that the result should be discontinued. And I actually covered Justice Bassey Perman, judgment that night, somewhere in Wuse to one small court there, when he delivered that midnight judgment. So I witnessed those processes, painful as it was, disappointing as it was. I think Nigeria also deserves commendation, right? For retracing its step away from the trauma of that period, and for a principal actor in the creation of that trauma to come out 32 years later is fine. It's welcoming. reliving, and of course it leads us towards restitution.
All right.
If for anything, I think it deserves forgiveness. But again, it's an autobiography. There's no autobiography that is completely clean. Autobiography is a work in public relation, an exercise in brand building, as the case could be. So it's probably towards building his brand, but he's in trying to build his brand.
Building a laundering image?
No, I won't use that word laundering, but maybe brand building, public relations. But in trying to do that, it's also providing education, providing information. To that extent, I think the former president of Bangladesh deserves commendation for helping us, with an important part of Nigeria's history.
Okay, if you say building a brand, I think IBB is already a brand. Maybe you say rebranding.
No, it's a brand, but you continue to build brands. If you rest on your hours in the course of building a brand, it can deplete. So you keep upping the ante, so your brand will not be, your brand equity will not be depleted.
Okay, fantastic. Many thanks, Professor Adeni, for what you have said. You took part in that election. You saw how it went down, and I'm sure Kasim Afegba also took part in one way or another during that election. But you see, there are some people watching at the moment who don't know what happened. So even as we talk about this, I'd like you to just quickly run us through what led to the annulment of the June 12, 1993 presidential election. And now, with this revelation, what message does this send to politicians and those aspiring, to go into politics in Nigeria?
Well, first and foremost, I think I would like to encourage people to get a copy of the book. Perhaps they will have a deeper insight into the factors that mitigated against June 12 elections. And coming from the principal actor of that period, who was the military president, such kind of information convey an authorial impression and finality, so to speak. All the other commentaries before they were at the realm of conjectures. And even from some of us who have spoken for him, some of us who have continued to interact with him and all that, the IBB is very hesitant in making some declarations, some points. In his heart of heart, he wanted an Abiola presidency. That I can say for free. Knowing him, and knowing his kind of person, and knowing the kind of relationship that existed. But we are quick to forget that he was running a military government. You have, let me say, I will call him primus inter pares, first among equals. When you plot a coup and you are chosen as the head of state and all of that, you have to also be careful on how you are able to manage and balance, the algorithms of power. Otherwise, you may find yourself in another soup. Because even yesterday, at the event, they captured the irony and contradiction of the whole process of military interregnum and what have you. Look at General Yakubu Gowon seated, who was torpedoed by a coup that IBB participated in, seated to launch, his own memoirs. Look at General Obasanjo also, who was also part and parcel of that coup. And by the time you look at the whole process, Muhammadu Buhari sent in a representation, in a former minister, Jaji, and knowing that IBB was the one that torpedoed his own administration, you almost think that it was impossible for them to even interact. He was detained, kept in house arrest, and for some years before he was released. And so when you look at the gathering itself, it means that, well, even though there have been issues in the past, they have already created, a way forward for themselves. It's like politics of no bitterness, let me put it that way, because there are some politicians that will want to deal with the other person with a long spoon. But these persons, with the role they have played in the past, when coup plotting was still fashionable in Africa, and by extension West Africa, and you almost think that this is not possible. But I want to crave the indulgence of the public to take time to do a lot of historical reading. They should be reading books of history and all that, because yesterday after the event I was interacting with a young man who almost had he had formed a position about June 12th, and I asked him, 1993, 2 years ago, how old were you? He said he was 3 years. That means growing up he has been fed with the wrong narratives on June 12th and all that, and he has already formed an opinion which he's entitled to. So a book of this nature will try to correct some of the misconceptions, some of the processes and all of that. And I keep telling people, power game is a different ball game altogether. If you don't want to take it, that's you. Both home and abroad, power game is deeper than what you see in the public domain. President Tinubu will tell you that power is not served a la carte. And so there's a reason why he said that. You know, you have to sit back, you plot your graph, you design strategies, you improvise techniques that will guide you to navigate all the tractions in the process of acquisition of power. And at the end of the day, those who know power too well say power is a crazy aphrodisiac. It makes men blind to their real intentions. And so because what's salam around you in the process of, rendering power is another different ball game altogether. You see all kinds of issues, all kinds of temptations, all kinds of trappings, rank-a-day, prostrating, eye service, praise singers, and all of this. These are all the condiments, that normally fire the spirit of power. And so, God bless the man who is able to live beyond those trappings and sees the bigger picture of, championing, his own power game when he's rendering it to deliver service for the people. But we're just taking up an item from that book, which is the June 12th, which occupies just less than a chapter. There are quite a number of things that Babangida said in that book. There are quite a number of things that he did in this country. We saw the launch, and we saw Dangote saying that Babangida created the private sector in this country, and that one day they got about 30 licenses in banks for creation of banks. All the top banks we are seeing today, apart from Union Bank, First Bank, and maybe one other bank, the others were created during Babangida's government, and they are doing well, creating employment and all of that. Even the Abuja we are seated today that we are discussing here, it was created in terms of infrastructure. IBB literally built Abuja. And so there are so many things to take away. But of course, given the record of history, where you have one issue, dominating a discourse, it will literally almost obliterate all the other achievements you have achieved,
All right.
process, yeah.
Thank you, Kassim Afegbua. Even though Ray didn't ask me whether I participated, but let me inform her that as a student, I trekked from the mainland when the crisis started, the riot. I trekked from the mainland where I schooled to Surulere area where I lived, so I participated.
That was a good exercise for you.
Well, by the way, Prof,
Yes.
beyond the historical significance, do you see, any political or legal implications arising, from this admission? Could it also, affect future demands for justice and reparation?
Well, it can be one of many things. And of course, we are talking about history here, We're also talking about politics. But legally, I doubt if there can be any other implication, because we have moved on, sort of, and all frayed naps are increasingly being assuaged. President Tinubu was an actor in the June 12, in the pro-June 12 movement. He's the president today, and it was full of effusive praises, for President Babangida yesterday. So if a President Tinubu sounded the way he sounded yesterday, is an epitome of the kind of feelings, the kind of emotion that is gradually resonating with all those who were probably
angry with the man. And like I said, I was part of it even as a young man, as a young journalist. I felt bad, in the initial stages. It took me time to begin to look at him, President Babangida that is, from a different perspective. And in retirement, he has lived a good life, sort of. He has played a very good role as an elder statesman, welcoming people, talking to people, preaching peace largely, avoiding controversy. So he has continued with his personable nature. And
don't you think there are people?
Excuse me. And that's why, to some extent, I've not read the book, but I've read snippets of it, But the only area from the snippet that I read, especially from the account of Olusegun Adeni, who read it, who did a slight review in his column, I am expecting a retort, from the Abacha family, for instance, because he largely placed the blame on the annulment of the June 12th at the doorstep of General Abacha. It can be looked at from a different perspective because Abacha is no more around, to defend himself. But I want to believe that, families, or friends of General Abacha might come in to provide a countermand, to some extent on some of those declarations. But again, it's also a mark of courage on the part of President Babangida, to volunteer those information, realizing how close, he was to General Abacha. But again, it also tells us about, the other dimension of leadership. Sometimes, when you are too nice as a leader, you may lose control. And sometimes when you are not necessarily even too nice, a leader may not be completely in control. A leader can be captured at any point in time, because that leadership position can turn out to be a cave, where you are insulated from reality. And in being insulated, your aides or your lieutenants, your trusted ones, may lead you into the direction you do not ordinarily want to be led. But back to what I also said earlier, it's an autobiography. An autobiography is an opportunity for an actor to render the account of his trajectory in life, But again, there's one commonality with autobiographies, You cannot get the other side. It's not a critical rendition of accounts. It's one that is out to portray the person writing as good. If, for instance, I'm writing my autobiography...
You can't say you're bad.
No, I cannot. If I lied at any point in time, or if I ever cheated on my wife, I'm not going to put it there.
Exactly.
But ordinarily, I'm supposed to put it there. If it's a critical
But what of the
review.
Abiola family? You didn't mention in all of this.
No, the Abiola family...
They could lay claim to being the losers.
Yeah,
they lost a whole lot.
The Abiola family has largely been assuaged. You do not forget. Even before President Buhari recognized former MKO Abiola, the influential billionaire that won the election, there had been some kind of restitution. There were relationships, tribal relationships between the families, and eventually President Buhari did what he did, and that was a high point of recognition. So I do not see them coming out to want to do... to want to seek a pound of flesh at this moment, in my own opinion.
32 years,
30, but I just think that we should honestly move on, forgive IBB, and of course regard him for who he is, a great leader who was very good in decision making, who was very personable, very creative. Remember, he was the first military head of state that adopted the title president, ordinarily a nice person, but again, like I think Afegwa hinted, sometimes, like Bertrand Russell said, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's only a man that is not human that may not fall into the trappings, the temptations of power, which can lead one to misuse it sometimes, or to be lost in the position that he's occupying. But he has done well on account of this book. I've not read it, but the bits and pieces I've seen, it's quite revealing and insightful.
Many thanks, Professor Adeniyi. From the way you have spoken, you have forgiven IBB because you keep saying Nigerians should forgive.
Yeah.
Anyways, Chief Kasim. Did I say Chief?
Prince.
Yeah, I think there's Chief somewhere.
I'm Prince.
Prince, sorry.
I don't like that title, Chief.
Prince Kasim.
We give out chieftaincy titles.
Okay, good. Of course, the Isako clan, a very impressive clan. Okay, when you spoke earlier, you talked about the fact that IBB has come out to speak and it puts a finality on the June 12 matter. Former President Obasanjo spoke yesterday and he said, I quote, "You have written a book. It's Babangida's story. The book will be read, quoted, and criticized. Some will agree with you in part, others will disagree, and some may even reject it entirely. You know, and like Professor Adini was trying to say, this is his own story. Do you think that with this revelation and this book coming out now, it's going to create more controversies? Do you see it bringing about, you know, if you like, more devastating consequences, you know, for this country in whatever way, politically especially?
No, let me borrow the idea of Prof, my very good friend, Adeni, that when people write biographies, autobiographies, it is their own perspectives, the side that they want the public to know. And so Obasanjo's comment is naturally the normative order when autobiographies are written, because they are seen from the perspective of the writer, who is cataloging and detailing his own experiences, what he went through and all of that in the course of his life, so to speak. And what Obasanjo, President Obasanjo, former President Obasanjo said, captures the nature of life. You have the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have those people who are naturally well informed. You have the bystanders. You have the onlookers. And so in trying to dissect, you know, the rubrics of what make up that book, people will form their opinion of what the impressions he has conveyed, what it means to them. And so we are not expecting everything to be swallowed hook, line, and sinker. We are expecting that the discerning mind should have opportunity to make an informed position. If they were left in the dark, ab initio, they are hearing from the man that was part and parcel of that process, just like hearing from the horse's mouth. So the angle of the Abacha that he talked about and you raised, I think it's courageous for him to even say that, because I had known from time, you know, in my interactions with him, that the blame, most of it, you know, rests on the shoulders of Abacha. And why do I say this? If you read Professor Humphrey Wolsey's account, you will see that the last meeting they had before the election day itself, Abacha was, you know, raining abuses on him and all of that, shouting at him and saying, you are telling us you are prepared, where we have security report that the country will burn if there was an election. And IBB now beckon on him and say, Prof, are you ready for June 12th election? He said, yes. He said, go ahead. The June 12th annulment is an interplay of forces, or was an interplay of forces, a coup within a coup that was predominantly anchored and, you know, hatcheted by those who didn't want it to happen. That Babangida was going to hand over power to his very good friend, MKO. And so in the algorithms of power, you need to balance the nuances. And people just see these things, the thing rests on his table. I asked IBB several, I say, when this decision was taken, why didn't you reverse it and say this thing? You are not the commander-in-chief. He just laughed. He said, you civilians always make the mistake of thinking that we military men, we don't go to school, or we didn't go to school, or we don't understand power. But we understand it better than you. The man who is the commander-in-chief is the one who carries gun. I don't carry gun as commander-in-chief. I'm a general, but I don't carry guns.
The chief of army staff.
So when you are coming down from your house, he said, when you are coming down from your house, your bodyguards are the commander-in-chief. If they pull a trigger, you are gone. And the man will submit himself, handcuff me. I don't just like the face of the president. He said it happens everywhere. I should go and read biographies.
Yitzhak Rabin.
Of course. He said it happens. So he said, what will you do in that manner? Are you going to say that you are the commander-in-chief and all that? He said, so you need to be looking at even your bodyguards. there is always somebody who is called a low ranger, who does not like anything you do, but is doing the job. But how do you discover the low ranger in your security bodyguard formation? So I have learned quite a lot of things from him, interacting with him and trying to understand power and the rendition of it. And so it was in Castina actually when that test statement of annulment of June 12 was issued, unsigned. And that was it. And for him, coming back, he already left Castina. I think it was the commissioning of the Castina airport. He already left, came back to Abuja, and summoned a meeting. By the time he saw the faces of all his colleagues, contemporaries, and all that, he knew that something was in the offing. And so he had to be careful for him to stay alive to even write this story.
I wish we could allow you go on and on. I was getting carried away myself, but it's the much that we can take at this point in time.
Yeah.
We just have to get on with our next conversation, which is on the MPC resolutions. Please don't go away. We'll take this backgrounder and we'll return for the conversation.
Of course, we need to thank our guest. Yes, many thanks, Prince Kasim Ofegwa. It was a pleasure to have you on our program.
It's a pleasure always.
I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
And of course, I want to also appreciate Professor Abiodun Adini, Professor of Mass Communication. I also know there's a new designation at the Bayes University.
Oh, this is fine
that's
too.
unfair. We'll celebrate.
This is fine too.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being our guest.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so now we're ready for that next conversation. We'll take the background down now. Stay with us.
The 299th Monetary Policy Committee meeting wasn't just another gathering. Originally set for February 17 to 18, it was postponed to accommodate new inflation data, and when the numbers came in, big surprises awaited. January rebase inflation rate stands at 24.48%, a contrast from the 34.80% in December 2024. But despite the drop, the battle against inflation is far from over. The CBN chose to hold the monetary policy rate steady, reaffirming its stance in the fight against inflation.
That inflation is trending down and is looking positive. All the indices are looking positive. Foreign exchange rate, we all know, has started to trend down and is more or less achieved stability. It's been stable, and we've spoken about the differential in the rates down to less than 1%.
The decision, a firm hold on the key interest rate, a signal that the CBN is staying the course in its battle to keep inflation in check. The bank believes that maintaining the current monetary stance will help consolidate gains while avoiding unnecessary shocks to the economy. Meanwhile, the Naira's recent stability in the foreign exchange market suggests that the policy stance may be yielding some positive effects.
So our own objectives have been and will continue to be to achieve stability in the foreign exchange markets and in the financial markets. More investments coming in, which should spur the badly needed growth.
So what does this mean for the average Nigerian? Borrowing rates remain unchanged, inflation control remains a priority, and businesses will be watching closely to see if this decision brings the economic relief they need.
All right, many thanks, Musa Abubakar, for that background report. And to begin our conversation on MPC resolution.